Reflective Podcast.
Got
The
it.
quote was, "We always need to be on wax," and I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, so let's do our catch up like we were gonna do, and then obviously whatever jump into at any juncture.
It's perfect. I remember my dad saying that to people on radio shows sometimes. If they started asking him questions, and he'd be like, "I'm not talking. Are you on? Are you rolling? I'm not asking you a question until we're rolling." Well, I was just saying, how you doing? Let's do it on while we're rolling. So
Yeah.
So speaking of how you're doing, how are you doing? Where are you at? What's
I'm
up?
I'm good, man. I got out of the gym not long ago. I'm going to a Laker game. I have actually kind of like a hard out at 6:15.
Beautiful.
So we have a little over an hour. Is that enough time?
Perfect. We're gonna do so much in 1 hour.
Okay, wonderful. And then going to a Laker game later, and
Wow. Who are they playing?
they're playing the Dallas Mavericks. So Luka. Yeah.
Be fun.
Yeah. Yeah, so but all is well. Just got out of the gym feeling charged up, pumped up.
Strong. You've been really
Strong.
on fitness embodiment. I've been seeing it.
Yeah. I'm feeling like that's important, you know.
Would you say
It
you're
feels
at
good.
the best shape of your life, you feel?
I'm getting there. I'm going for that. I think that
You've
like
been in better shape before?
when I was like 21 or 22 and I was in college, I had this year that I was redshirting in basketball.
Wow.
So I was like basically practicing with the team, like going up and down the court. And then once the season started, I just started lifting weights like crazy because they weren't practicing every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is probably because my cardio was like insane. And then I was just like lifting for 90 minutes every single day. And I would say that is probably my best, but I'm getting there for sure. And obviously there's different types of fitness, right? So it's like, in 2018, when I was doing hot yoga 4 times a week, that was pretty damn good too, in a different way, but as far as like strength and like muscle building right now, I'm like doing kind of like bodybuilding style stuff where it's like hypertrophy training, super isolated mind muscle connection. And I'm having like a lot of fun with that. And I'm building muscle that way. And it feels cool. It reminds me a lot of yoga almost. It's like a meditative practice. It's a breath work practice. It's a focus practice. And it's above all, it's like, to me, it's just a discipline practice where it's compounding interest over time, like super, super slow growth, And I've been like, when it comes to this, it really causes you to slow down because you realize like, oh, okay, if I want to get like in the best shape of my life, I think that's the main issue with fitness is like people don't realize how long and how much discipline it actually takes to get in like fucking great shape. They're like, oh, it's 2 weeks away from like some event that I like want to be in shape for. And you're like,
two
I
months consistent, not 2 weeks.
Well, even 2 months. Like, I think that depending on what your goal is, I think it's 2 years. Right. I think people think that they can get in shape in 2 weeks, and I think it takes 2 years. I mean, it depends on what you're trying to do, right? But like, if you're trying to like really build meaningful like muscle, which is usually people are like, oh, I want to get toned, and like getting toned is just essentially building muscle. It's just there's no such thing as toning the muscle. There's like building it or not building it, or whatever, right?
Toned is an aesthetic byproduct of the process.
Muscle. Right. And so, yeah, so I think that it just takes a lot of time. Like, and then you start kind of picking up things. And I think that the mind muscle connection is like really cool because it's when you're focusing on one muscle group, you're really having to like figure out how to engage it and squeeze it. And then figuring out, you want to almost, the last reps are the only ones that really matter because it's like engaging it, warming it up, essentially getting it to a point where it's like almost going to reach failure and pushing past that. So there's like that mental challenge there too. Cause for a long time, I think at the beginning of last year, I was going in the gym and I was, I felt like I was lifting weights, but I wasn't getting the results that I wanted. And I'm like, I'm lifting weights every day. I feel like I should be growing and I should be, and I just wasn't exactly getting the results. And I realized like, it was really just a 1% shift into progressively overloading, meaning lifting heavier weights every single time, paying attention to the reps, the amount of reps I'm doing, and then paying attention to how I'm feeling and pushing past those limits to go to like failure or damn near failure every time. And then the other thing that's crazy about the discipline around weight training and fitness is like the diet has to be dialed. You have to pay attention to the macro nutrients and how much protein you're getting and how many carbs and like what you're expending. So it just becomes this like whole life thing where it like 1% is like you can't take any days off. Like I think there to a degree, it creates a lot of freedom in your life, because when you're like super disciplined 6 days out of the week, you can kind of like allow things to, you can have some freedom in like, you know, 1 day a week or whatever, or even you stay disciplined on it for six weeks. All of a sudden it's like, you know, you're looking and feeling really, really good, and you can kind of start doing whatever you want. You know, the one thing I think that's cool about it is like,
and then when I shift off of this topic,
okay.
Yeah.
It's like, to me, I think what's cool about it is like, you're staying ready instead of getting ready. You know what I mean? At some point, 3, 5, 10 years in, it's just like, this is you now. So like, you could take 3 months off, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, and you probably wouldn't, because it's become such a lifestyle shift, but yeah. So that's my current fitness philosophy.
Beautiful. Well, I think that's a perfect segue to the fitness of the rest of life's philosophy. And I see you as yeah, like I feel like we dove in fast, and I wanted to like zoom out for a second and be like,
wonderful, good. Yeah, I didn't even mean to.
All
I
good,
just
all
started.
good. You're very passionate about fitness. I love that. I've known you for like 2 years now, I guess, and you have a very embodied wisdom on several different departments of life. You're a professional on very specific compartment of life, but you're kind of a studier of all life from what I've witnessed you as. And I love on this podcast, Fully Reflective, and I forgot that I had been on your podcast, and we kind of just dove into all kinds of stuff. But on this, I wanted to talk to you about how your spirituality, how your philosophy has led you to evolving your life. And I think that's an actually awesome place that we started on physical embodiment, to kind of look at how our philosophy causes us to show up very much as a utility, boots on the ground, real life. How does our philosophy show up in our everyday life? And you're talking about really concentrating on these muscle groups. I want to zoom in on like life muscle groups, almost like, instead of looking at the body as different muscle groups, like looking at life as different muscle groups that you've been wanting to evolve and wanting to push what was the you used a phrase, push past that point. And Mia talk about that term FOMO. Where are you heading, and what's most lighting you up right now? It sounds like your physical fitness journey is definitely most lighting you up. But what else is super, super lighting you up, and how does that fitness, show up in the rest of your life fitness?
Yeah. And that's kind of why I think even the fitness preface that we did is so important, is because, man, I just feel like the discipline that it requires to get into great shape can be mirrored into any facet of your life. And that is something that for me, these last couple of years, pandemic, etc., working from home, really kind of being my own boss and in charge of my own time, and, trying to stay off the devices and trying to be present and grow businesses and relationships, etc. I realized that like this fitness journey over the past, let's just call it like 10 months, has been really, really good just as a guide for the rest of my life. I'm like in 90 minutes a day of discipline plus, paying attention to what I'm eating and being disciplined in that sphere, planning ahead. But like, it's just amazing what you can accomplish in that amount of time. So I think even for me going into this new year, it's been inspiring to just see how much progress I've made in fitness to myself. And then being like, with that same discipline, what can I apply? How can I apply this to every other facet of my life and essentially earn the same compounding interest? And that's the thing I think that's really interesting.
Let me zoom in there. Do you have, and this is a little domino, I think, in a direction, we'll see. Do you have awareness that you're like in a maybe top 1 percentile of humanity that is quote unquote did the thing they wanted to do?
Yes.
And is that now dominoing into this new, which I kind of feel like I have some background story. Like I know that it has to a degree of you're like, okay, I hit like a ceiling of some kind, which for most people, I think they don't ever even get to that ceiling. And then I feel like I got to know you in this almost like, it's like the feeling of the auspicious, like I'm on drugs, I'm on medicine, I'm on like there's a spiritual psychedelic thing happening. Like, do you hear that? Can you guys hear that? And everyone's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And you're like, you don't hear that? And you're like, you busted through this ceiling and you're looking for the next ceiling of sorts. And like, I feel you talking about the fitness and how that applies to the rest of the things. How has that awareness of like that busting through of that ceiling caused you to like look at the other plateaus of things to volcano towards?
I think it's like when you achieve goals that you set out to achieve and you achieve dreams that you set out to achieve, a couple things can happen. I think you either need to raise the bar higher, and I think that's semi-necessary, but then you also just need to appreciate what has happened and the blessings that are within it and enjoy it. It's like, I think a lot about enjoying the fruits of your labor in a lot of ways. Like, there's this energy where like when you achieve a goal, it's like, you don't want to just be on a hamster wheel. You want to kind of be present in it and bask in it a little bit and embody it and feel it and know it. You know what I mean? Because it's like, we spend all this time, even a lot of times, battling whatever imposter syndrome it is. And then all of a sudden it's like you arrive at the place that you were going for, but then it's like you continue to just raise the bar higher and then continue to have imposter syndrome after you're already in the space that you set out to be. So I think presence in achieving the things that you want while still raising the bar higher to continue to push forward and achieve, but I think that it's funny about presence, and I'm trying to I want to like land the plane and stay grounded here, but presence in the moment, and I know you know this, is so important because I feel like in the future, when you're super present in a moment, it stretches out in the future. So like when you have it as a memory, when you're thinking about it as a memory, when you were super present in a moment, a lot of times the memories in the future will be better. I'll give you an example.
That's a trippy statement. The memories in the future will be better because of your presence in the moment.
In the moment. Yeah. So, and so my client Kyle was playing Coachella, and that was a dream of ours. He played it in 2018. And I remember we snuck into Coachella in 2014, and we were thinking, damn, it'll be so dope when he's doing this. And he's just like a baby artist at the time, just starting to like tour and whatever. And the dream was very much there. You know what I mean? And I think that when that finally happened, I remember at the time, I was very intentional going into that weekend because there's a lot of work that goes into that, especially on the management side. There's just so much planning, both creatively helping put on an amazing show, but then like sorting out the guest list and all the passes and stuff.
So much.
It's a lot. There's just a lot of inbound, and it starts the Coachella. Well, you know about it. You probably know you're booked about 6 months before it happens, but then the flyer actually just came out this week, so it's kind of relevant. But like first week of January, the Coachella flyer comes out, And then, it's exciting. That's a big, exciting announcement. Every artist dreams of playing Coachella, so it's like one of those fucking top 5 festivals globally. So it's just like such a cool experience. But I remember going into that, I was just very like, I want to be present this weekend. You know what I mean? I really want to just be here. And I spent a lot of time, because it's a high, you know what I mean? It's a freaking drug, it's like, this is our time. This is what we came here to do. And I remember like reconnecting to my breath a lot during that weekend. And now when I think back about it, granted, it's a big, amazing moment that I probably would never forget regardless, even if I was completely numbed the whole time. But I have so many fond memories of just even little small things, moments of presence from that weekend, And I think it's kind of a good metaphor, because I think, wow, even in relationships, or we're always kind of constantly thinking about the past, thinking about the future. And I just feel like there's, being present is like a very, very special superpower. And I feel like it stretches the moment out. And then in the future, when you like access it via memory, it's a different experience.
This to me is the kind of ultimate syringe needle into the vein of FOMO. That you can talk about FOMO in a more like event-based FOMO, but I think the real FOMO is an identity FOMO. The real FOMO, you get some lighting there.
Yeah.
I felt it.
Was that dark? I didn't even see.
No, I could feel the that California sunset just happened, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, just like I'm so curious, man. I mean, I was a fan of Kyle before I even met you. I mean, out of all the people in the world that are doing music at a high level, not everybody stays positive. Not everybody, I remember seeing Cuddy, Logic, Kyle, like a handful of people that were like peace, love, positivity. Like, I'm not here to, make some ratchet, like antichrist, fuck your bitch till she dies music. And somehow yet still that peace, love, positivity, it gets the same, maybe not the same, but you're still busting through the ceilings of your dreams. And that's not, it's not easy thing to do. I'm curious to hear like the wisdom and the insight that I know you've witnessed and seen interacting with different huge artists and people who have made it, people who have really like lived, not just lived and did, but like are still doing their dreams. And how FOMO plays into that, and how like like a certain level, and we started talking about fitness, but like creative fitness, like identity fitness, that like, what does it take from your perspective that's different from how most people live their lives? Like, why is this even a conversation? Is because most people aren't doing it. So what does it take to really do that so that there is no FOMO? You hear I'm kind of pointing that?
Yeah. No, totally. What I kind of wanted you to do was, you kind of started talking about FOMO and your understanding of it. And I wanted you to just kind of, I'm here to learn from you too. And like, usually our frequency is always like, you like, I want to let you like go a little bit. So I think that'll help me set the scene for referencing like a story or a memory or something. So if you could just jam on that, just defining like your vision for FOMO and what it is and how it manifests.
Beautiful. Thank you for the baton. Well, there's a couple different gradients of it, and I think it's helpful to point at it as a topic is meant to be super utility based, not as like some philosophy that stays up in your head that's like one day, if so, maybe. It's like, how satisfied with your life are you? Period, or question mark. And therefore, how satisfied with the character that you're living life through are you, or are we? For me, this happened that my spiritual journey, my quest started because my friend took his life and I was depressed and I was super confused as to the reality of the ability to hit the eject button. And that compared to my dad living his literal dreams and not just claiming that nothing was missing. I mean, I saw him going in his own emotional kind of bouts, and I saw that he was obviously not a perfect person. And I saw the difference between a worldly embodied successful person and quote unquote spiritual masters that were teaching something that caused the character that does the seeking to change. So many people talk about being a way that gets you stuff in the world, or that gets you the identity that you want in the world. And then the spiritual path for me was so different because it was talking about reorienting your perspective of your character and what your character wants in the world. So these people are talking about be a way to get stuff in the world. Be a version of you to get your shit happening. And the spiritual path is saying realize the truth of who you really are before you try to do that stuff. That for me was the shift, and also prevented me, I think, from making art that was more ignorant. And I was really afraid of creating more karma. I was afraid of missing out on alignment. And I feel like some people are afraid of missing out on money, and they haven't had someone nearby them have money or have success. It's not always money, but money, power, and success, I think, are inextricable for most of humanity. They're right there tethered together for the idea of what the ego wants. But like you, I think I saw you have this interesting perspective on it, because you see, I talk about it with the other Nolan often as well, as like, not everyone gets to be it. Very few get to be it. But a lot of people get to be next to someone who is it, and get to watch the person who is it make mistakes. And therefore, then they kind of lose it. But the person who was never really quote unquote it, but got to be next to the person who was it, now gets to benefit from the wisdom of the mistake, kind of practice being it without being stared at, and kind of it might be arguable to be like a better position overall, with like, you know, a more steady climb up that mountain, as opposed to some people, whoa, you're smiling. Where you hearing what I'm?
Just because I think that, yeah, you know, being close to people who have had, and when you're saying it, I think
we can define it too.
Yeah, we can. I think we can define it, because it sounds like it's the end all be all, but I would almost describe it. I know what it you're pointing at. What it you're pointing at is fully embodied, creative individual that is having worldly success. But I think that, and that's fine for the sake of the conversation, obviously. But, and I know that, like, to me, I almost look at it as having that, is getting it and having that je ne sais quoi, that understanding of just the non-dual, a lot of the stuff you talk about, the stuff you have taught me about, like that is more it to me than just like being an embodied famous person. Now
it's two different stadiums.
It's two different stadiums. So like being it in the attention thing, man, it's just what I realize is being near, and let's just point at fame as the thing. Fame is challenging for anyone who has to deal with it. And I think it's a responsibility almost. And it's confusing. And my friend Brick called it in conversation recently, he called it a psychological disorder. And I was like, yeah. And
I look at it as a trauma. It's a type of trauma, I think.
Yeah. He called it like I think he called this, I don't want to misquote him, but yeah, it's a trauma. Because the way it's just this other thing that's not tangible, that you can't own, you can't grab it. It has utility. It completely reorients your view of the world, the way you interface with other people. It's really, I mean, man, I don't know if I would wish it on just anybody. You know what I mean?
I think most people have the karmic preparation for it.
What'd you say?
I don't think most souls have the karmic preparation for it.
No, yeah. And I just heard someone was talking about Matthew Perry and his book or whatever. And
he just had
I knew nothing. Yeah, I knew nothing about that, but I could imagine, you know what I mean? And you see most famous people go through it. It's like almost a more challenging psychological human experience, you know, at some juncture of their life, they have it's like way higher highs and way lower lows. I think a lot of it has to do with the dopamine system to be like, uh, you know, to get into like the medical part of it. It's like that dopamine roller coaster, like what goes up must come down, you know, it's like, to equal or greater force. So it's like when you're having these high highs, essentially you're being worshipped. It's like you're going to have just as equal lows, you know, which puts you underneath the ground, you know, not just hitting the ground. It's like,
This is a perfect segue, tributary river moment to come back to a call we had, I guess, a week ago. And the topic that inspired us to be like, let's do a podcast. Yeah, we should do that. Which I think, correct me if I'm wrong, my memory is kind of foggy, but the kind of conversation was about brotherhood. At least that it peaked in us saying, let's do a podcast. Okay, so then it's step back to the beginning of the river, the mouth of the river. I feel like one of the big first DMT aha moments I had around what celebrity was when I was reading the Steve Jobs biography, and the term was reality distortion field. So, and then also something around, like, I think what psilocybin taught me, that when someone becomes famous, their egoic structure calcifies around the Atma, and they basically get hardened and solidified as an identity by whatever degree in which they are witness. So you're more famous, you get calcified that more intensely. You're less famous, you're witnessed by this amount of people. You're more famous, aware this amount of people are watching your ego, and so your ego hardens by a multiplication table in a degree that's equal to that amount of worship or witnessing. You're less famous, etc. But either way, it's a calcification of the ego at whatever age you're at. So however old you are when you get famous, your ego basically hardens around that moment. And it makes it harder to have spiritual progress because the world pulls on your psychological structure and says, you're that, right? You're that, right? Don't change on us, because that's the brand that we bought. We're invested, right? And it's an actual psychological social threat that hardens the egoic structure and basically causes calcification around spiritual growth. Back to the tributary. I feel like it's hard for probably men and, male, female, full spectrum, to have real soul-based friendship in that stratosphere, and not just friendship in the social third density, let's hold hands through life, but accountability and camaraderie and reflection on those nitty-gritty granular aspects of life. That if you are getting worship like that, I think that's you hear about these stories where the people, they're super famous, their shit doesn't stink to them, and they kind of like push everything out of its life that is going to alter its reality distortion field.
Yeah.
And I can't deal. But back to now the tributary of us talking about this conversation. It's an incredible thing to say, I'm in harmony with you. I'm an individual, you're an individual. I feel electromagnetic coherence. Let's walk forward. It feels like love. And it would allow me to benefit from your lens on me, and potentially you would benefit from my lens on you, and actually be a mutually beneficial gift in our totally segmented and separate and yet totally unified growth and evolution. And I feel like when people get famous, it islands them. It says,
Yeah.
I'm not like the rest of y'all anymore. And that was something that I saw from my pops of like, damn, 20 years old, you basically get worshiped as that version of yourself. And now you got pressure from outside, but also from your psychological structure to stay in a way that's going to get that feedback loop, which you're talking about is the dopamine.
Bro, yes.
Couple things there.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I don't really know where to start besides that was an even enlightening, super well painted picture of what it is. that had that ping that was like, this is true, you know. My understanding of it was that feels super, super true. Even how you were talking about how famous you are, you get more calcified. Also when you start getting attention, you know, I think that's the thing. The identity structure is really, really interesting because, you know, as people are buying who you are, you then are in a way forced to buy it yourself and then forced to sell it, and hopefully sell it for a long time because you and potentially all your friends and family are reliant upon it. I think that's the thing that becomes really challenging is
it turns into a farm.
Yeah, exactly. And man, that's why friendship and reciprocity in friendship and what's the term that you always use with me that I always appreciate is consensual. Or you have used that. Yeah, you've used the consensual thing, which I think is like, you know, I always just appreciate your ability to point at it. Like even prior to you, like you'll say, may I, you know, you'll ask, can I, you know, speak on that? Can I say something? Can I enlighten you? Can I say something that I have perspective on what I'm saying? So yeah, I think I don't really, that was kind of a beautiful monologue, and I almost want to leave your monologue as it is, but I do know that to be true. And I actually have one interesting story that I'll share about a person who has it, as we were calling it earlier. Years 2018, and this guy's like a very, very famous actor. I think I think I'll leave his name out of it because I think that I don't know how relevant it is, but let's just say Hollywood A-list actor. And I'm in New York and we're partying and we're hanging out with this guy, and this guy is just so sharp, so present, so kind, so just cool, awesome person, grounded, looks you right in the eye, very, very in the moment. And we were sitting having drinks kind of in a more intimate space. And I asked him, I was like, cause we were just talking about what we had done that day. And he was like, man, I had a busy press day. You know, he's like, I shot the cover of Men's Health. I shot the cover of Vogue, I want to say. It's like, and I'm like, oh, so this is the level, right? And I like kind of chuckle or whatever. And I was like, man, what was that like? Because to me, that rings off. Something that big, you know, even the biggest Hollywood actors, right? I mean, you might get a couple of Men's Health covers, but that's a big deal. And then when you're shooting it, that's a big deal. Like that's something you work for. That's a Coachella main stage performance for someone like that, for sure. And so I was curious. I asked him right then and there, this is 2018. I'm like, I asked him about the presence. I'm like, did you just like soak that up? Or like, how did it feel? Like, you know, and immediately he was just like, nah, man, like, I just keep my head down and just keep working. Like, I try not to get like caught up in it. I try not to get whatever. And I was kind of like, yeah, no, I'm not like talking about getting caught up in it. I'm just saying, like, were you aware of every moment of today so you can remember it forever? And he was kind of like, nah, man, it's just like another day at work kind of thing. Like, and he was downplaying it. And for a second, I kind of had trouble understanding what exactly he was trying to say. I think he was trying to be humble, but I was like, dude, I was like, this is it. Like, this is the thing that you worked for. These are those moments, you know? And if you kind of just sweep them under the rug or brush them off, you know, I was like, this is something that should be celebrated. And it doesn't need to be celebrated with like popping bottles and doing drugs and then like abusing yourself. It needs to be celebrated by like being present and being embodied and being in the moment, you know? And he kind of was like, I could tell that his eyes were kind of widening. And I was like, yeah, he was just like, yeah, he's like, you know, he's like, a lot of this stuff, man. He's like, I just do it. And like, I hope that like someday I'll enjoy it when I'm like 70. And I'm just like, wait, what? I was like kind of confused because I'm like, no, but it's now is when it's happening, right? Like now is the moment. This is when it's supposed to be enjoyed, you know? And I think that imposter syndrome to me is real. It's just like, you know, he was, because he was, it didn't seem like that's what he was sharing with me. He was just like, man, I just feel, you know, grateful to be there and blah, 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 blah. And, you know, you never know, like he doesn't know me that well. So, you know, he might've been kind of just being humble for the sake of, you know, me meeting someone who's famous, and I know who he is, of course. And you know what I'm saying? And so but what I did take from that was just this thing is happening, and like you're embodying the thing that like you probably dreamed about your whole life, and so very few get to do it, and you're just sweeping it under the rug. You're not being present with it. You're on to the next thing. You're doing the next thing. It's dinners, it's drinks after. It's like, you know, and I think, yeah, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I got notes. I had to start taking notes because I was getting flooded with stuff. The last thing I wrote was, some develop tools or have developed tools, and maybe not even they didn't consciously develop them, but maybe they just have tools that are karmically developed. That's why, to me, Raja Yoga provided incredible context as to like, what is karma? Why does somebody come into the body and they're just lit, physically handsome, articulate, charismatic? They didn't work for it. They just are that. So some have tools with development, that there's just development around these tools that are worldly beneficial. The tools are for the world. You don't take those tools and like go to the jungle and like benefit from them privately in the jungle with like nature. It's like, use these tools to get success. It's like a garden of identity. It's a farm of handsomeness. It's a like, use these things and fucking monetize them. Like, you know, hustle, use these things and do it. But then they could be underdeveloped in the skill set and tool set that allows them to have presence. So they have worldly development, the density of consciousness, the karmic structure that allows worldly success, but they're underdeveloped in the upper densities that would allow that, upper octave emotional. Oh yeah, you sent the classic. You sent the
power versus force,
spiritual, evolutionary levels of consciousness aesthetic. Anybody on the spiritual path at some point comes across this and says, oh, that's what I've been navigating. Oh shit. Neutrality, way better than shame, but it's still not serenity. And acceptance is lit, but it's still not embracing it. You know, I love this. I remember.
How accurate is that to you? I'm just curious because I know this is your frequency in general. So you probably have your own,
Yeah. Now we're into my topic for sure. To me, this is just as scientific as like pointing at the anatomy of your skeleton and saying, see, that's the elbow. See, this is the clavicle. See, that's your jaw.
Yeah.
This, to me, specifically paired with the electromagnetic light spectrum, is as scientific as your skeletal system, because it's all vibratory electromagnetic rates of oscillation, literally the wiggle, the wobble. This is vibrating at a very specific wobble. The I am presence is moving into a psychological structure and slows down and slows down. I'm alive, and life is good. Life is really good. This is nice. So they're all genuinely oscillatory measurements of the I am presence. And I think it's really interesting, especially someone like us, we've been that kind of character that's like lit enough to know what it must be like to be in that seat, but karmically just next door to it.
Yeah.
And that's like the duty. We've just been, okay, God, sit there. Okay, sure. Watch what's going on. All right, yeah. They watch their psychological structure and notice what's benefiting from their success and what's also detrimental. Oh, okay. I'll just, you want me to just study this? Okay, I'll just study it.
That's so true, bro. It's so true.
One thing I wrote, yes, some people are the embodiment, but aren't aware of their embodiment. Some people aren't embodied, but are hyper conscious of not being embodied, which can lead to further disembodiment, but it can, in their evolution, lead to a higher style of embodiment, especially higher than someone who has the embodiment. And because it's mirrored back as successful in the matrix, they don't have inspiration to improve it. Does that make sense?
Right.
Like it gets reflected back to you as just thumbs up your whole life. And it's like almost less of a need to improve.
Yeah.
Like they get reflected back to them that they're great. And then the person that's like has the potential for greatness, but keeps getting the mirror of it's not it. It's not it. That's not who I am. They have that, which is why, let me finish the statement. Well, now I don't remember the statement. I was going to say, which is why someone like Kobe is the it of all its, because they have the full mirror of, you got it, man. You have the archetype. You have the archetype that wins. And then they look in the mirror of that archetype. That would be fine for most people to just say, ooh, let me just kick back now that I got it. Now I'm going to coast. Now I'm going to put it on cruise control. But there are some, this is what I want to talk about. 0-point fountainheads. Not everyone's a 0-point fountainhead, and most have zero to no relevance to even discuss it or explore it as a topic or as a theme in their life, because they're not designed for that style of greatness. But somebody who's given the archetype that has totally sustainable success parameters, that looks at it and says, I know there's a higher refinement possible for me. And if it's worldly, you got that physical embodiment, that's fine. You could just chill there. Yeah, but I want more emotional intelligence, man. I don't want to be distressed with my partner. And I don't want a partnership that's like emotionally unhealthy. Like, she's sexy. And yeah, I'm sexy and I got money. Yeah, but I want to refine my emotional intelligence. Like I want to evolve my ancestral lineage so that my kids come into this world and I'm not giving them the same baggage that my parents gave me. Not everyone has that same calling.
Boom. Fucking heat, dude. Yes, exactly. And I think that when you're getting affirmed all the time, sometimes that's enough.
That echo chamber.
A lot of times you realize that, I just feel like that kind of rock bottom or that spiritual enlightenment click or that punch in the face sometimes is just different for public figures. It's harder, faster, more catastrophic, more, and so I think
you mean an ego death.
The thing. Yeah. Or the mirror that they finally, because sometimes I think for them that becomes hard is finding effective mirrors, because they're kind of going, all the people in their life that work for them or that aren't as famous as them or aren't as rich as them, they don't know how to use them and they're involved in an alternate reality almost, to where it's hard for them to even relate, where they're kind of like, yeah, that might work for you, but like you're not dealing with this like other thing floating in your atmosphere,
But let me add language to that. Some people have that success and they're in their own kind of world and reality because of that success, and they engender a kind of blind spot because it's not where they're looking. And then there's souls that are kind of parasitic psychological structures that come in and then benefit from those blind spots and turn into their own mirror to give that person that's successful this mirror of whatever they think that person wants from them, so it doesn't disturb their ability to be a parasite on their success.
Proof. Yeah. Yep.
So not everyone's willing to come into that situation and endanger their ability to be close to the situation with truth. One more time. If somebody comes next to a successful person and sees a blind spot that this successful person needs to, yo, bro, yo, you be literally like smelling like poop, bro. Like I think you got like a breath problem or something. Like the successful person has a blind spot and people nearby them are afraid to tell that successful person about it because it would endanger the non-successful person's ability to be in close proximity, which for most people, they just want the egoic gold star of being close to a famous person.
The proverbial yes man is born.
Yes, man. Right.
The yes man is born from that. And I think that people who are outside of it are going, man, they see somebody do something outlandish. Why aren't Kanye's homeboys telling him da, 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 da? And it's like, man, because he signs their checks, or because he don't listen,
Yeah.
Kanye's famously said, I don't take advice from people less successful than me. So by way of his dudes who maybe even see his blind spots and maybe even bring it to his attention.
Yeah.
But he's not hearing it, I don't want to like point at Ye as like a problem, but like it's just, I have compassion for fame and celebrity. And I think it's really, really challenging. And I think it's something that young people think will solve their problems. Right. And I think it, depending on what your problems are, can solve some, but then creates more.
And once you get some skin in the game and you see that farm and that garden for what it is, you look at the people who just think that once, so someone like these with these vantage points, we can see the young person that's like, man, once I get famous, I'm that's it. And we have this compassion because we're like, oh, that's gonna be a rude awakening for you, my guy, when you get to that door and all of a sudden now your soul is being harvested by like Luciferian cabal, Illuminati folks that just want to basically harvest your karmic potential. And now you're stuck as being the ego version of yourself that you wanted to be famous from. Oh, good luck. It's almost cleaner to not, it's like the proverbial, like, the very thing that we thought was the loss ends up being the win.
Right. The lack thereof, you're saying the lack thereof fame
the thing we
is
thought,
actually.
Yeah, the thing we thought was our, not wound, there's a word I'm looking for. The thing we thought was our detriment ends up being the blessing.
Right.
It's like there's some old Zen proverb. It's like, yeah, you wanted to go to that party, but then like your car died on the side of the road and you had this whole ego death, like, fuck, man, my car, fuck, I'm not where I want to be in life. And then like you hear like there's a shooting at the party that you were trying to go to. Like,
yeah.
Some auspicious thing is making sure that I'm right where I need to be, even though my psychological structure isn't always aware of that.
Right. Yeah, man.
Which, okay, you kind of steered away once we started talking about it, but I felt some Christ light electricity, so I'm gonna steer us back into it.
Okay.
On the topic of Ye.
Yeah.
And I won't say anything that would cause me to be a bad friend, but I have this incredible relationship with Steve Smith of Donda, of Yeezy, of Adidas, and I had this incredible blessing of hearing about how it's going behind the curtain, so to speak. And also my brother Octavio, I think I told you about him, the actor.
Yeah.
We've talked about like the spiritual, super deep as it can go in terms of an esoteric perspective. From that perspective, talking about these different egos that get famous, so to speak, but then us looking at the karmic structure of the actor behind the character, behind the play. And even Ye's recent thing on Alex Jones with the mask and like the fucking Nazi and Hitler. And
I didn't listen to that full interview. I just kind of saw the hot takes. And what I realized about interviews and what I know about Ye is you got to listen to the full interview for context. Yeah. And really any interview, any clip that's like taken out of context, I don't necessarily support. That's why TikTok's so interesting because everyone's going,
Oh man.
Yeah, he said this, yeah, he said that. And I'm just like, I just want to listen. I'll listen to the full thing. Cause there's a couple times where even in this whole thing, I mean, we can kind of dive into it, and we're both obviously massive Ye fans. And like,
Well, I just want to hit one note though before
okay, cool.
before it leaves me. The idea of being used by the divine in a way that makes us look socially bad, but in actuality, we're a pawn on God's board, and we have to endure looking silly in a moment because we're also obeying a guidance system that's a higher priority. And again, I'm not with him, and I don't even know enough to say I know exactly how his psychological state is going, but I think that's an incredible reference point for someone who's willing to destroy their own social standing in order to be right with God. And specifically on the Nazi and Hitler thing, is basically the idea is like, I thought we're supposed to love everybody. And then I kind of heard him doing this little troll, like, it's a curveball in baseball kind of thing, but with persona. And he's like, oh, I love Hitler. And, you know, how much of the smoothie blender is he pressing a button? I'm not exactly sure. But the idea of, yeah, going on these topics that aren't allowed to be spoken on at all. And then because it's a no-no, you actually go, yes, yes, yes. That is a rare cookie.
Yeah. And I think, but to me, I think the other thing that's in the mix of that with Ye is he's also kind of an attention whore. Because he knows how to use attention, and that's like a really rude way to say it. I don't even want to say it like that. I want to say it with more love.
Unfortunately, though, it is what it is.
I want to say it with more love because I actually do like some of his messages, and I like how free. I like that he's pushing back against, you know, constricted speech, and I like he's speaking his mind. But I think that, at least from what I know about being Christ-like, I don't know if all the time. I feel like a lot of times he's operating in his ego, and he's saying hurtful things, and he's saying things out of ego, and and I'm no one to judge, right? But I think that's sometimes where the message kind of gets mixed up in the whole thing, where I'm kind of like, even if you're following God, and that's where you're getting the inspiration to even take some of these more difficult stances and crucify your public persona. I feel like it's not entirely the most Christ-like thing. It's like a Ye-like thing. It's an ego-like thing a lot of ways.
I hear you saying kind of like an ego-based Messiah complex thing that sometimes imitates Christ-like as an idea, but maybe emphasizing the whole crucifixion aspect of it instead of the alignment embodiment aspect of it.
Precisely. And I actually heard a mentor of mine has actually posted this to his Instagram several times, but a guy named Dan Wiseman, who's a music manager that mentored me very early in my career and inspired me to get.
I remember him. I remember us talking about that, Dan.
Okay. He spent some time around Ye, and he said, like, in the studio and in several meetings, I think he spent like a whole year kind of like pretty near him. And he said that Kanye a lot of times in meetings would say stuff like, he has this one quote of saying, now it's slipping. If you're loved, you're trapped. So I don't want to be loved. So he's constantly, wow, you know, it's like he's loved for college dropout, late registration, graduation. 808s. People hated that at first.
Right.
Every chance he starts moving into this thing where he starts becoming too loved, I think that that's like a frequency that he's super aware of, because he understands, like, even in that, like, how many times has this guy been publicly canceled? How many times has he been, you know, like, I think he's hyper aware that, like, if I'm not constantly reinventing and pushing the boundaries too far and stirring it up, then I cease to be relevant. And I think obviously he's really, really good at some of that stuff. Just sometimes I don't even want to say I disagree, because I appreciate who he is. You know what I mean? And I don't need him to be somebody. That's something I'm working on, is like, needing people to like be this person that like somehow like I agree with. Like if everybody was the person that I idealized, it's like the world would be a fucking boring, terrible, weird place, you know? And so I think trying to remove myself from like needing anybody to be anyway, I think is a good exercise, you know? And that's something I'm actually carrying into the new year, and I'm like trying to keep present.
Well, I think you got hard out in like 7 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, but let's jam. We could jam probably till 6:15.
No, but perfect segue into this baton off of that last statement you said of like needing people to be another way. But like, what if we could just really just be fully okay with like, it is what it is, that statement, you know, like, oh, it'd be great if it was this way, it'd be great if it is this way, but it isn't. So it's that way. And I'm actually super genuinely okay with that. Not only am I okay with that, I'm embracing the fuck out of it. What I want to pivot that to is self. And that version of self that's like imagine if in your fitness journey, you know, you're in the gym, then you look in the mirror, you're like, fuck, man, I'm a fucking bitch, man. Why aren't I getting I'm not seeing gains? And like an attitude towards self that not only is not approving of self's progress, but is like one's own worst enemy, I feel like is a thing that all of us have navigated at one point or the other, where we're in that point in the journey where we haven't recognized enough progress to even be happy about it. But I think this as a topic could apply to even the people up here that have achieved all this stuff, and maybe even full circle back to you kind of busting through that ceiling and like that, whoa, where am I now? Look around kind of moment, which is, it is exactly the way that it is. And this Buddhic path that for me is not a Christic path, it's just different. The Christ path and the Buddhic path, that's why I feel like Raja and Kriya Yoga and Siddha are these like unifying grip tape, glue, electromagnetic spiritual glue that brings this lunar emptiness and this solar presence into this unified, total equilibrium, equanimous, equalized state where we're genuinely okay with things as it is, but we have this rhythm where we're still interested in our progress. We're not overly pushing the progress to the point where it now loses the presence of the present, but we're also not negative towards the current with the perspective that it should be different. I feel like that's the 0 point that we've talked about in so many different ways, that if more people could embody it, there would be just less mental suffering, be less need for opioids, less depression, less identity that's against one's own current position, and more identity that is with it as it actually is. That's more workable. It's more of a workable situation.
Yeah. Man, it's something that I'm always trying to peel back the layers to every single day, every opportunity I get. It's
I think I got one more baton, and then I want to hear.
That's why I like talking to you so much, because I'm like learning, and I'm like, I wanted. Sometimes I'll ask you to say the same thing again, but in a different way.
Well, this is good. It's good. This will be the one more candle on the birthday cake, and it's good to use poetry and nonsensical terminology right next to super literal, logical stuff, I think. Birthday cake, candles, etc.
Yeah.
Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged, Fountainhead. We've talked about this? You know Ayn Rand?
Poet, right? No? Author,
50s. I think she passed in like the 60s, but like wrote epic novels. 2 of them were famous. Atlas Shrugged was the most famous. The Fountainhead, I think it might be my favorite.
You've read both of them?
Yeah, audiobook. Couldn't recommend it more.
Okay.
And I read both of them or listened to both of them while I was just beginning my yoga teacher training, when I was microdosing a lot of LSD and psilocybin and walking around New York City like, someone built all of this. And that Steve Jobs interview, like, look around the world, like, this was all built by people no smarter than you or me. And yet we're all indoctrinated into this consciousness. It's like, the world's out there, you have to be this. And so Ayn Rand, Fountainhead, she talks about, I just want to reference one principle, and it goes right back into what we just kind of said at the psychological structure that is with it as it is in the most helpful way possible. In Fountainhead, Ayn Rand talks about two different types of people. 99% of humanity is type 2, and then there's this itsy bitsy part of humanity that's the other part, but it's the Fountainheads and the second handers. The second handers are literally all of humanity that is an always response to the new invention, always in response to new ingenuity, always in response and reactivity to what is. And then there's this group of folks like Kobe, Steve, both MJs. This is not the big list, but there's a list that's very specific characters that are in touch with their soul's source and obedient to that way more than they're obedient to anyone in the world's expectations of them. Potentially could be said to a fault, but it keeps this thing called integrity super intact. And they move forward.
Global integrity, or their integrity. They're operating on a different integrity scale, right?
They're operating on a spiritual integrity that causes them to put their potential into a craft. And all of the world's integrity is actually in response to this group of people. And I don't mean Illuminati type of Rothschild, we want to control folks. I mean people who are in touch with God, in touch with their soul, in touch with their sadhana, their practice, their dharma that allows them to know what's needed for their own personal evolution, and it inextricably is connected to service to others. And those people obey that path and they move accordingly. And then their whole life is actually in navigation of all of the second-handers trying to say, you should do this, or you should do that, or what about all this stuff? And this person's just like this to their purpose.
Yeah, straight Bruce Lee, laser focus.
He's one of them. So that batoning back to you,
Steve Jobs. Yeah,
is there.
It's funny because we point at it. Would you say Elon is in that category?
I gotta say, because he's an outlier. What's the homie's name who wrote that book?
It's funny because we have to exist again, like next to some of these folks, and like
appropriately
some people know them. You know what I mean? And so and how they manifest as a human is probably really frustrating to second-handers, right?
Yeah, and some second-handers get sad about it, and some second-handers get maniacal about it and want to get close so that they can parasitically take. Some second-handers want to mimic, which she references all of these different types of characters in the book that basically get near fountainheads and mimic. Some try to steal, some try to, the fountainheads are bad. Create all these different, every egoic idea possible in response to someone living their life's purpose. And I just feel like our whole, non-ending conversation is about how can I be more right with God? How can I be more right with my potential?
Yeah.
I'm going to always be interacting with humanity and other people, but I can only take care of this one.
Yeah. Yeah. And really being hyper aware of your unique gifts, and playing to those, leaning into those gifts, I feel like is so, so important. And man, I know, I'm like a big words of affirmation guy. So it's like, I like to hear them, but I also like to give them. And I think that trying to call people out on their gifts and noticing something about them that they have a gift for it and bringing it to the surface, because it's like, man, we're wandering around this thing in this meat suit and we literally have superpowers and we're interacting with people and they don't even see it. They can't call it out of us. They can't support us in it. They can't understand and it's quite frankly, it's frustrating and it's slowing us down and it's, but ultimately it's not necessarily any one individual's job unless they see it, right? It's their job. It becomes their job when they see a gift and they can call it out on you, call you out on it.
And I feel like you, of all types of archetypes, have been cultivated and prepared to be guru, which guru just means remover of darkness, but as a mirror for whatever clients and stuff, you've been a mirror for others, which means, hey, you do this really good. Time to lift you up. But hey, I don't know if you're aware about it, but like this over here, these are loud signals that could probably come down. And I can tell, and I've found awesome harmony with you in feeling this in conversation, but also you talking about you navigating your own life. And I think for anybody listening to this, it's so relevant for all of us, because we all have people in our life that sometimes it's relevant to be like, no, they need a positive mirror. But we also can't be afraid, and I bet you would agree, we also can't be afraid that sometimes we need to remind others of their blind spots. And what's the best practice for that? Doing that to ourselves, lifting ourselves up when the positive mirror is needed, but also when our shit does stink and we got something to look at and we don't need rose tinted glasses, we need utility. We need something practical to look at this reality and be sober minded about it. Like, let me be clear. That's the prayer. Let me be clear about this. Let me be conscious exactly about what this is, and not distort it into some other way that I would like it to be. Let me see this as it is.
Yeah. So important to ground a lot of these things, and yeah, just look at it sober, you know.
You got one? Or
yeah, no, keep going. I mean, I have time, dude.
I got one.
Yeah,
I got one for you.
I want you to keep kind of jamming on this, because I actually really like this topic. But yeah,
Well, moving forward, what for you? I'll make it sweet and simple. Moving forward for you, what do you feel like is like a specific single point? I can feel you reading something important.
No, I'm listening. I'm hearing you. I was just drawing a circle with my finger on the notepad.
Oh, beautiful daydream meditation.
I'm with you. Yeah, I'm with you. I was listening deeply.
Moving forward, what do you feel like is a single point mantra that it assists you in a super helpful way? Like, what's something you're working with that's like you feel yourself that you've been working with lately, and moving forward, it's coming with you?
Let me actually pull this quote that I read the other day that I was just like, whoa.
Because you're to me, you're the guru archetype, because you're constantly in assistance to others. It's your career path. And I think it's an interesting thing for people to hear about. Well, then how does the person who helps other people help themselves?
Yeah. Oh man. That is you know what's funny is even what you kind of pointed at with like being the mirror, words of affirmation, building people up, but then being clear about and sobering and grounding other things, and the dance between that when you're kind of being the guru, being the removal of darkness. It's really that dance is really hard. It's really challenging.
Why?
You know? Just because to me, what I'm learning is my medicine isn't necessarily for everybody.
Sure.
And so I think that I've figured out that how my medicine works for me. And I think that's rare in itself. And I think that that's wonderful. But I noticed that it's not necessarily for everybody, but I have to continue to give my medicine at scale, because that's what I'm here to do. So I can't be offended by if it doesn't connect, if my message doesn't connect, if I'm too affirming or too negative. I just have to be me.
Perfect segue.
You know?
Your most viral tweet of all time. Perfect segue.
Yeah.
For someone who has no idea what I'm referencing, maybe like give us an intro.
So,
and then tie it back to what you said.
Yeah, because I wanted to pull this other thing, but because that was like, that's been kind of like an interesting thing to navigate. Basically, I put out this tweet the other day that said something like, here, let me actually just pull it. I don't want to misquote myself here now, do I? I said, music artists, it's 2023. No more, I just make the music. It's not enough. You must learn to market. You should spend, in parentheses, 50% of your time on storytelling, branding, TikTok, IG Reels, YouTube, newsletters, podcasts, etc. No manager, label, or PR agency is coming to save you. And obviously, the way I wrote it was effective, straightforward. It was punchy, line by line, marketing, trickle down effect. I kind of knew what I was getting at. I knew I was poking something with a stick. And while I believe it to be true, there was a lot of support by way of likes, retweets, etc. And there was a lambasting of negativity and anger and frustration. And I think it's funny because to me, I'm just reporting what I'm seeing from my vantage point in a way that's super clear and straight cutting through. To me, it's late. This messaging is late. This messaging existed in 2018. This messaging has existed forever, right?
Right, but
this
it's still cutting edge.
Okay, so maybe.
And it interrupts ignorance.
Yeah, it's a pattern. It's for sure a pattern interrupt. And I think the way I said it was a lot of the hate was like, this is grim, this is dystopian, this is la, 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 la. And, you know, at some point in time, it existed for about, let's just call it 14 hours online, or maybe it might have existed for 24 hours. And it got like 250,000 impressions, which is like miniature viral. That's not like really, really big, but it was charging people up. There was a lot of quote tweets. There was people saying mean shit to me. And it's just interesting because, however, I completely stand on it. I just was tired of the discourse. Like, to me, the conversation was just, people were just hating on it. Then there's like people going like, I'm just going to support whoever doesn't do this. And I'm like, yeah, like, I agree. Like, that's fine. Do that. Support people who don't post on the internet and market themselves and whatever. But if you are an artist and you want your music to cut through and you want to grow an audience at any level, you don't got to be famous. You just have to, I believe heavily in, I think all those things that I mentioned are artistic. And that's the thing that those people are like maybe attached to, is like just playing their instrument and then wanting that to be enough. And I'm sure they can find jobs and become a musician or whatever. But I'm like, if you're a fully embodied artist and you're trying to build an artist career in the music business, this is a fact to me. This is where it's at. And the other thing that people were saying that was just like completely misguided was people were saying, this is why music is so shitty now. And I'm like, subjectively or objectively, I don't know if that's necessarily even true. Like, if you're a purist for old music, that's one thing, but the industry has shifted. It's like, this is a price that we're paying for completely opening the floodgates to commercial music releases. There's 100,000 songs that go on to Spotify every single day. So in order for that to happen, whereas like in order to press a vinyl, a label had to put it out back in the day. There had to be, that's expensive. It's not a cheap process. Very few people were putting out independent music releases, even pre-2000, you know what I mean? So it's like, I think, you know, what just the digital nature of the industry changing has occurred. Like, what's occurred is basically like, no, and everyone's kind of on their own, and you need to even create a groundswell in order to create a business, in order to even have a manager to manage your business. If you don't have a business, you don't need a manager to manage the business, you know, or any sort of executive or any sort of staff. So I stayed by what I said. I ended up taking it down just because I was tired of I should have left it up because it's just like, it was kind of cowardice for me to take it down. But I was tired of the discourse, you know, like the discourse wasn't interesting to me because there wasn't enough people that were kind of like, everyone who agreed just retweeted it and liked it. And they were just like, yep. Because they knew it to be true. You know, I saw Russ liked it. It's just like, they knew it to be true. It wasn't like, there's nothing left here. But then the people in the comments were just like, we're upset about this information. And, you know,
and real quick, who are those that were upset by something that could just be said as true?
Oof. Who are they? That's a good question. I don't know.
And then
disgruntled artists.
Okay, then apply that to life. Not just music industry, but like, who are those
that are upset by truth?
That are upset by the way that things just genuinely are.
Yeah.
I think those are the ones that are missing out on literal reality, that are looking a bit too much through those rose-tinted glasses. And this is it's so funny that I forgot to reference it until the end of this conversation, but it's the epitome of what we've been talking about. It's a 0-point statement. Hey, this is just the way that this is. And, you know, in my subjectivity, I feel I'm actually aligning my subjectivity with objectivity. And this is just the way that things are. Everyone who's so exactly seeing the same thing, which is from all angles, it's just the way that it is. Yep. All disgruntled opinions are basically those that are around the edge of the volcano being like, no, I think it's an okay place to set up shop. It's not gonna explode anytime soon. It's rumor. But you're just pointing at something. And by being that, you're a mirror.
Yeah. And that's what I realized, man. It's like, it actually, that experience actually taught me a lot. It taught me a little bit about what getting a ton of attention and negative attention is like to hold. It taught me about what it's like to be a super clear, effective mirror and be delivering information that people may not want to hear, you know? And I think that, yeah, I'm going to be sharing a lot more this year. I feel really called to do that. And so I think that even though this was one of these like kind of tester things, I threw it out, and who knows, I'll maybe never have something that gets that type of attention, but I'm going to keep my vessel clear and the antenna open, ready to receive, and then be able to deliver it. Cause I think it's powerful. I did get a lot of people kind of coming to me, DMing me the next day, like, oh, why'd you take that down? Dude, you're right. What do you mean? People were coming to my defense.
Did you archive it or deleted it?
I deleted it. Oh. Yeah. I just was not prepared to, I feel like emotionally, it was so funny because it was like, I saw a friend of mine who, like, I won't mention his name, put up another tweet, kind of like saying like, it's not all about marketing and and I'm just was like, oh, you're kind of like, you're going to play the other side of this. And I just was like, I didn't want this thing to topple over on me, to be honest. Cause I was just like, bro, I don't really care that much. If you think like, these are conversations that I'm having in private with every single executive, every manager, every fucking artist. Like, if you don't like it, and then it becomes this, to me, it's like one of these things where it's just like this groupthink thing. So it's like, if enough artists realize that, oh, if I play the opposite side of it, it's kind of punk rock and cool. Oh, all it takes is like a big artist to do that. And then, you know, people are calling me an asshole and fucking every name under the sun. And I just been kind of like, whatever, dude. Like, literally, like, here's the piece of information, you know, and like, I get that it's like a lot of it's like kind of this like fake universe. To me, it just helped me kind of understand what these like high profile people like deal with on the internet, especially ones that are like super clear, effective writers that know how to say something poignant. Because I'll see them write something and it's like everything that they're posting is getting a lot of engagement, but then sometimes they'll be like, yo, I can tell that they're emotionally going through it because they're having to defend themselves. They're getting frustrated with the fucking town square and how people are responding. And so, yeah, I think this was just kind of like a little baby trial, kind of like got it going for me and warming it up. But I actually do semi regret it. But it got to the point where in the evening, I was just like, man, I'm like, it was like midnight. I'm like trying to put myself to bed, but I couldn't stop looking at it because just someone was saying, fuck you, you fucking prick. This is what's wrong with fucking music and the music business. Pricks like this, capitalist pig. I'm just like, that couldn't be further from the truth, man. I'm just observing what it is and reporting on it. And hopefully, you know,
it gets some backlash.
To me, it's late. To me, if you don't already believe this and you haven't been acting on it for the past 2 years, you better get with it or get lost, you know, if you want to like have an impact, you know.
Facts.
Yeah.
Last mirror on that topic for you from me is, I think it's again, it's not positive or negative. It is what it is. But your framework in response to that says, you know, you said something, not to quote you, but this might never happen to me again, et cetera, something like that. A more cocky, egotistical, arrogant perspective of your iteration could say something like, yeah, and I'm gonna keep hitting y'all with these facts because that's what I am. I just see the truth. And if you don't like it, you don't like me, you don't like truth. You could stand into this perspective that's a posture of defense and arrogant, kind of like lifting yourself higher than you actually are. You just zero pointed in on a truth, and you got positive and negative mirrors off of that. But the ripple was from a pebble, and the pebble was not personal. It's just a pebble. And it touched all of these mirrors in these ways, and it cracked some, and then it actually polished others. Over identification of being those cracks or those polishes, I think is a tricky place to live. That requires a lot of mental calories. But yeah, I intended to give you a compliment, but it's zero pointed itself out to neutrality, which is like, yeah, you could be a more arrogant version of yourself. It's like, oh, I got fucking facts all day. But you said, yeah, and I might never have another moment like this again. But it is what it is. You might have another moment again. And
I'm intending to improve my persuasive writing. So I hope to do that because I do like starting a conversation. Part of it I thought was kind of interesting. But it was like, I realized that I was like, I'm here to serve artists, you know what I mean? And so like, then kind of like realizing like, oh, how do I defend myself against this thing? And I'm like, man, I love artists. I'm going to be side by side. And I have been side by side with the artists that I work with from day one, and I'm like, help guide their artistic journey, literally mind, body, soul, spirit, etc. So it's like, I kind of was like, me being painted as this dystopian fucking music executive and I'm the problem with the industry is like
funny.
Not exactly the thing I was like going for. So like, I was realizing that I was just kind of being crucified to kind of bring back to our original point on this thing that I was kind of like, well, maybe. And I I was critiquing my own writing too. And I was like laughing at some people's responses. And I'm like, oh, it's just the way I wrote it, And what I realized too is that hive mind is like, as I've started to just really, essentially, I would say, gain wisdom and learn about writing and paying attention to persuasive writing and paying attention to thinkers and how they articulate themselves. It makes it like, people get riled up by the way people talk and the things they say and how direct they are, indirect, and the type of things they talk about. So I kind of realized, I was like, oh, if I saw this would not bother me at all. In fact, I'd be like, thank you for putting all that information in one simple tweet so I can just zoop and then go on about my day, where other people are like, what? It's like, it was a nice response, I'll say. Enlightening.
Full ripples.
Yeah.
Well, my friend, my brother, thank you for diving in on all these swirling topics and motifs with me. Any last words to send people into a place that you'd like them to check anything out? Student of the Game podcast.
Yeah, Student of the Game podcast. Me and Rocco got one on mine. It was fucking incredible. Coming soon. I think I'm gonna drop that soon. I'm just gonna be sharing this like person to person. Obviously, I'll post it up on social media whenever you drop it. But like, I want my people to learn about you, because I think that and your perspective is so fresh. So I'm just going to be sharing that. And then, follow me on Twitter for maybe controversial music industry takes, if I can locate my huevos and continue to just put them out without deleting them, and maybe post and like delete the app off my phone so I'm not paying attention to the fucking idiotic responses.
Just turn off.
But yeah, exactly. I should probably take a lesson from Ted on that. I could be like, hey, Ted, when you say something that just pisses everybody off, how do you handle that? And he's just like, you got to stand on truth, brother. Like,
yo, let's literally, I'm going to ask him, let's get you on his podcast and let's bring that up. We'd love to.
Yeah. Cause I think he's you have to have thicker skin out here, man.
He's got some experience on that topic.
Good. Yeah. Thank you. So Nolan_Smith on Twitter and Instagram. And yeah, I want to get feedback on this. I want to know what people think. And maybe some of the stories, some stuff that was interesting, takeaways, whatever. I think it's valuable. These are the type of conversations that I like so much because I want to know what's coming from them, you know?
Facts. Thanks for tuning in, y'all. More coming soon from us, obviously. And thanks again, bro. Love you.
Love you, bro.